for Smart Western Rail. You can see our website there at the bottom, and you'll see that again, and I would encourage you, and I'll probably encourage you many times throughout this presentation, in fact, for more information, to go check out our website. It's a work in progress, but, you know, like any good community-based website, it should be a work in progress as long as it's around. So what are we going to do? Who are we? And what is the objective tonight in speaking to you? What I really want to do is actually give you some information about light rail transit in Ottawa. Generally in Ottawa and Western Light Rail specifically, rather than go on about what we think, just set a baseline, because there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I want to take folks through that. Then I want to actually navigate some of the city's recent decisions. What has been decided, what will be decided, and what are the rough timelines, so we can understand a bit about the process. And then some of the specific milestones, what we have coming up shortly. So who are we? We're just a bunch of people who live here in this neighborhood. We live around the Richmond and Byron area. We use the park, and it's a centerpiece of the community. We also use public transit. We shop on Carly. We enjoy the Ottawa River Parkway. We're not anti-train. We're not anti-transit. We're not anti-development. We're just people who live here and want to make sure that the things that are best about our community are preserved through any development that happens. We believe that any option that's under consideration affects us greatly, and we think the decision needs to be made in a smarter way than in a way that actually destroys the fabric of the community, bisecting it. So what are some of the things that we've done recently? Well, we've had a grassroots community meeting where the group was basically formed in May. We appeared at the City Transportation Committee on June 6th and the City Council in Hull on June 27th to speak to the Environmental Assessment Interim Report studying the Western Light Rail Transit. So I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. We launched a website. We discussed this issue with a number of media outlets. We began researching LRT development both in Ottawa specifically and more generally. We wanted to be more knowledgeable about what was going on here and what is this business about building trains in general. And ever since, we've been encouraging our neighbors to learn more themselves and to express their own views about LRT in our neighborhood, whether that's through letters or communications with officials or politicians or just talking to others in the neighborhood. We have done some awareness sessions at the Westboro Farmers Market. We were there for a number of weeks on the weekend handing out information. And we did a community meeting, not unlike this, at Dovercourt. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I've heard this stated many times. Sometimes it's followed by, in my view, misinformation. So my promise to you is to not do that tonight. I'm going to do everything I can to not give you any misinformation. It's going to be more or less, you know where we stand now. So from this point forward, it's going to be less editorializing and more what are the basic facts around this project. So it's complicated. We hope to try to simplify it. The caveats around that are the ground is still shifting. Decisions are still being made. There's certain things that aren't known yet. There are things that are known. And frankly, are likely to change again if you've been paying attention to the history of light rail transit in Ottawa for the last few years. So I'm giving you the best information that we have at this point. Some of it's unknown, and all of it probably is subject to change, potentially. So, where's the blueprint? It's the city's transportation master plan, specifically the transportation master plan 2008, because the thing changes every 5 years, which means it's coming up for renewal in 2013. So the current blueprint is from that period. It identifies everything to do with transportation. And it sets a vision, a target date of achieving the plan by 2031. So that's your planning horizon. It's all 20 years out. But it also looks at the way the system will look beyond that time frame. So it has 2031, and then it has what would be less formally, but maybe an intention, not a plan, the way things might look sometime beyond 2031. So Chapter 5 is the part that you might want to pay attention to if you're interested in learning more about this, because this is the part that deals with public transit, and specifically light rail transit. The transit system is to be built in 2 phases, multiple projects, and each project is built in increments. Downtown LRT, which Councillor Hobbs referenced, is phase 1, increment 1 of the light rail transit project. So it's first up. Where is this stuff here in the western neighborhood? Western light rail transit is still phase 1. It's increment 2 of the light rail transit project. So there's a concern that some people, that have heard the information put out there, well, that's a long ways off, it'll probably never happen. That's possibly true. But it's next up. It's next up based on the current blueprint. The master plan that was subject to change in 2013. Not that far away. So what is downtown LRT? It's 12.5 kilometers with 13 stations running from Blair in the east to Tennis Pasture in the west. It includes a 2.5 kilometer expensive tunnel for a total cost at this point of $2.1 million. That's the price tag. That includes $0.6 billion from the feds and from the province. So the city's on the hook for the balance. So it's a cost share. Contract awarded, anticipated December, so next month. We expect to know who's going to win, which contractor will win the contract to build the system with full operation in 2018. If you've been paying attention to the news, there's an interest on the part of the mayor in particular to do two things: to get this thing moving, to try to pull it in for 2017, 150th anniversary of Canada, that's one thing, and control those costs. There used to be an additional station downtown off the tunnel. By removing that station, that reduces some of the cost pressure and potentially speed of construction. So some might infer, I'm among them, but I don't know that there's already some cost pressure mounting against that $2.1 billion we're talking about potentially sealing that. What is Western LRT? These are, and I'm going to talk more about this in a second, primary line design parameters. So it's not a formal plan, if you will, it's the design parameters. It's a 9 to 10 kilometer stretch involving 9 stations between Tunney's Pasture on the east end of the Western LRT, extending all the way to Baseline Station on the western end of the Western LRT. It's really all one LRT, right? There's not two separate systems, it's all one, but this is the western portion of it. The cost estimates at this point, as you can see, they range quite widely, from about $500 million to about $2.5 billion. And that depends on which option the city, subject to further refinement, which option the city chooses to pursue. The construction is intended to follow as soon as the downtown portion is complete. So we saw the date for that above, roughly 2018. Mayor's indicated a hope that it might be able to be pulled into 2017. So construction, if everything goes according to the current plan, about 5-6 years, probably 6 years out. So this is hard to see. All of the information I'm showing you, by the way, you can find on the city's website. I found it hard to find there. So we've reproduced a lot of this on our own website or given you links to it. So what I'm trying to do really is whet your appetite with the basic information and invite you to use our website as a portal, if you will, to get this information source document. To whet your appetite to learn more. What do you need to know about this diagram? Well, that's obviously the city of Ottawa. The thing you need to know here is buses are blue and trains are red. So the current plan sees in 2031 what you see in red are train lines, light rail transit, and what you see in blue is BRT, or bus rapid transit. So that's the plan for 2031. The current plan sees beyond 2031, so ultimately achieving the following. Buses are blue, trains are red. I'm going to flip back and forth between them so you can compare and contrast. See what the basic difference is? The basic difference is there really isn't much in the way of trains to the suburbs by 2031. But when you go beyond, that's when you actually see trains coming out here to Canada or Carhaven or Orleans. So that's the big shift. The 2031 point doesn't really see light rail transit to the boroughs. So I mentioned earlier that there was an environmental assessment. It was actually an interim report from the environmental assessment that came out and was heard by Transportation Committee on June 6th of this year. So a number of us went to council committee and heard that, and then we went to council and we expressed our views on it. The next bit of the presentation is going to take you through what did this report actually say? Because this is where you actually see maps. What do these routes look like? How will this thing prospectively work? There's three types of route options for the primary line. There's what are referred to as the northern options, and that's both running the train along the Ottawa River Parkway or running the train along some combination of Ottawa River Parkway and Richmond Byron. Second type of route option is Carling Avenue. Third type of route option is a hybrid, so some combination. So you start out here in the north, and then at some point you find a way to cross up and continue along Carling. So those are the three broad types of options. I said I'd come back to this primary LRT bit. That's quite significant. This is my definition. This is not an official city definition, but if you do a bunch of research online, I would say the simplest explanation is that primary is mostly, not exclusively, but mostly about serving broader regional needs, whereas a secondary or a supplementary line tends to be a little bit more local in focus. It's about serving the immediate local needs. So those aren't strictly and exclusively true, but in general, that's a pretty fair synopsis of the objectives of building a primary or the objectives of building a supplementary. What's your focus? What's the system designed to accomplish? So what does northern look like? Looks roughly like this. This is that first type of option. Somewhere here along the north, whether it's the Parkway or Richmond Byron, running from the downtown LRT all the way out here to Baseline Station. You'll see this, Carling, is a supplementary. So the plan actually envisages building a northern primary plus a second train line, supplementary serving more the local focus along Carling, connecting up here with the Carling Road train.
So that would mean like more stops, for instance. It's slow.
Usually you would see the train moving a little bit slower with more stops. So if you want any image, this is one image. You could imagine sort of a more trolley streetcar might be your supplementary versus, you know, bigger trains moving a little faster, bigger distance between the stations as your primary. Carling type options. It runs along here. And there's some sort of a supplementary running along here. The blue would indicate us in this case.
Is any of this above ground and above?
Come to that in a sec. It's a great question. So I've got some specific options that will show you the way that looks drawn from the city's interim report. Hybrid is just, as I said, some combination of the two. You start in one and then you find some route to transit north. So then continue along. So specific route options, from those three types, the city narrowed it down to 15 specific routes, and they were really all combinations of Carling, Richmond Byron, and or the Ottawa River Parkway. The Carling options are, and this is to your question, the Carling options are nearly fully grade separated. The Ottawa River Parkway options are nearly fully at grade, nearly, and the other ones are some combination, depending on which of the options. So grade separation simply means the train does not travel at the grade of the land. So it could be underground, partially underground, or it could be above ground. So you can think at the extreme, the hill subway would be grade separation, or an elevated train would be grade separated. Whereas at grade, the train runs basically along the level of the land. So the ORP is primarily at grade, and Carling is primarily grade separated. And the others are different combinations to get to 15 options. These were evaluated against weighted criteria categories. So there were a number of weighted criteria categories that the city looked at. They consulted, for example, community groups, they consulted business associations, they consulted agencies, so other orders of government as an example. And they looked at things like compatibility with community and cost and heritage, and there were a number of them, and you can see them in the report itself. And from those 15, 4 routes came out through a complicated scoring matrix as globally the best, the highest scoring routes. Here are the weighting selections here. Smart growth, compatibility with adjacent communities. Blended average.